Yemen's embattled president says he has reached agreement with rebels. The first care center for pregnant women in Ebola-stricken Sierra Leone is open for business. And a behind-the-scenes look at David Beckham's latest collaboration with H&M. Africa 54 starts right now.
Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. First to Yemen, where Houthi rebels who seized the capital Sana'a have reached a tentative deal with President Abdul Rabu Mansour Hadi, a strong ally of the United States in the fight against al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. VOA Sharon Ben reports that Washington is monitoring the situation closely.
Yemen's embattled President Abdul Rabu Mansour Hadi says he has reached agreement with Houthi rebels who have besieged his residence, offering to scrap a proposed constitutional change that rebels opposed. In turn, Houthi rebels have agreed to withdraw from their seized positions and free a top official kidnapped Saturday. The concessions come after 3 days of violence in Sana'a that raised alarms across the Gulf region to the United Nations and Washington, which relies on the Yemeni government in its battle against Yemen-based al-Qaeda militants. In Washington, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said monitoring the situation in Yemen is a priority for the United States.
The Houthis had obviously what you can only call violent objections to the refusal of the Hadi government to accept all of their demands with respect to the way forward, and particularly the Peace and Partnership Agreement and its implementation.
Rebel leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi had demanded a power-sharing deal with the government. The Gulf states, the United States, and Britain had urged all parties to come to a political agreement. The Houthis, who took over Sana'a once before in 2012, are believed to be backed by Iran. Mr. Hadi is supported by the United States and Saudi Arabia. Daniel Surwer of Johns Hopkins University says via Skype that if left unresolved, the political tensions could feed into sectarian Saudi Sunni and Iranian Shiite strife in the region.
We're facing a series of proxy wars that really are challenging the state structures in the Middle East. The Houthis can't pretend alone to govern all of Yemen, but they might pretend to govern a part of it. So I think we're in very dangerous territory here.
State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki says Washington's anti-al-Qaeda efforts with Yemen are continuing.
At this point in time, it's ongoing. We see certainly value in having a strong presence in Yemen, in part because of our continuing work on counterterrorism efforts.
By late Wednesday, the Houthi rebels appeared to be withdrawing from the buildings they had seized earlier in the week. Sharon Bain, VOA News, Washington.
For the latest, we are joined via phone from Sana'a by journalist and analyst Mr. Zaid Ali Al-Alaya. Welcome, Mr. Al-Alaya.
Thank you very much.
Yes, now describe for us, please, very briefly, the state of things in Sana'a today, the mood of the country today.
Come again, please. Can you repeat the question again?
If you can describe a little bit, what is the mood in the country this evening in Sana'a?
As I told you, there is a feel among mostly all people that are not feeling secure anymore. They have lost hope in the government. They have lost hope in the military. They have lost hope in what is happening since 2011. There has been a lot of deals sponsored by either regional or international powers in order to solve the problem in the country. Saleh was ousted in 2011, and an agreement was signed or initiative sponsored by the GCC Council, and then another deal was signed between Al-Houthis and the government called the Agreement of National Peace and Partnership. And yesterday, Wednesday, we saw another agreement that was signed. But all these agreements are going nowhere.
Now,
they are not doing any good for the Yemeni citizen.
Now
they are going from bad to worse.
Now, for those who are observing from a distance, we feel like, okay, this is some positive movement. Do you think this is going to hold, this current agreement?
These agreements are not being kept, Vincent. They are signed, and in one day or less, they are being violated or breached by this side or that side.
So
what is happening now? What is happening now in Yemen is they put the carrot before the horse. The state-run media are governed by the Houthis, and the government has no power over its own media channels, TV, Sabah News Agency, Thawra newspaper. All are controlled by the Houthis.
Now,
Zaid, yes.
Now, what are people saying? What has to be done in order to resolve this problem once and for all?
Look, people have lost hope. They don't care who's going to rule the country. All governments in Yemen since 2011 and even before have made citizens struggle to put food on their table. Citizens, normal citizens, that are the majority. We have more than 10 million Yemenis that are living under the line of poverty. Citizens are busy looking for food to put with their families. They are not. They do not care that much about politics. They want somebody who can provide them with basic services. They don't care if the Houthi would rule. They don't care if Hadi would rule. They don't care whoever would rule the country. They want food. They want water. They want electricity that doesn't get blacked out from 7 to 8 hours and sometimes more.
Zaid, thank you very much. We definitely will be talking to you in the coming days. Well, Mr. Zaid Al-Alaya is a Sana'a-based journalist and analyst. While speaking to Al Hurra TV, Todd Raffner of the Project on Middle East Democracy said the role of the United States in helping stabilize Yemen is critical.
You know, they don't want to see Yemen collapse into any worse of a situation. They're already dealing with a number of competing priorities with ISIS and with Libya and, you know, a number of other crises around the world, and especially in the Middle East. So I do think that they will, at least at the moment, support this political solution and hope that it can stop, you know, sort of the bloodshed that's going on. But I think a bigger question will be what the other Gulf countries do, and if they're able to put aside some of their differences with some of their rivals, and if they will undermine or help this situation in Yemen. I do think that Washington would see it as a positive development if the Houthis prove to be a consistent and effective counterbalance to Al-Qaeda. Obviously, Al-Qaeda in Yemen, in the Arabian Peninsula, is quite strong, and so I do think that's something that Washington is interested in. But I do think that the Houthis need to be a part of the political process as well. I don't think that, you know, continuing violent means will be anything that Washington is interested in supporting. So it will depend on how the Houthis move forward and how they're able to continue negotiating with this current government.
Well, that was Todd Raffner of the Project on Middle East Democracy speaking to Al Hurra television. Well, now turning to the crisis in West Africa, Oxfam says more than 1 million people may have been forced to leave their homes in northern Nigeria by the 5-year-old insurgency of Islamist sect Boko Haram. Children who have been displaced by the incessant insurgent attacks, have been particularly hard hit. Hundreds of children displaced by the conflict now live in Milkohi camp in the northeastern city of Yola. The UN Children's Agency, UNICEF, says that children are suffering the dire consequences of the conflict in Nigeria, losing their homes, missing out on education and risking their lives. Aid groups are trying to have students continue learning while at the camps. Christiana Ibrahim is a volunteer teacher at Milkohi camp.
Boko Haram pursued us from Michika to we come Yola. Then I stay here. Then I call teach these small children. I'm a volunteer teacher. I'm teaching them social study. Then I'm taking primary 1 to 6.
The International Organization for Migration has warned that continued attacks may force even more people to flee internally and to Cameroon, Niger and Chad, which could destabilize the region. At another camp nearby, children who escaped fighting are getting registered for classes. Without enough classrooms, however, the students are mostly forced to spend the day under the sun listening to their teachers. Displaced children across the border to neighboring Cameroon make up 60% of the 25,000 Nigerian refugees living in Minawao camp. In Niger, women and children make up 70% of the refugees in the impoverished southern region of Difa, which has seen a sharp increase in the number of people seeking shelter, according to UNICEF.
So coming here has been a privilege to me because I'm opportunity to meet children, talk to them, hear about their experiences from their place of attack. So it's now given me a better way to understand them and to follow them the way so that they will grow up the right way and regain themselves from the trauma they have experienced.
Well, the fall of the town of Baga to Boko Haram this month has led to increased calls for international support to halt an insurgency threatening to spread even wider in parts of West Africa. For more perspective, we are joined via Skype from Nashville, Tennessee by Moses Ochunu, is a professor at Vanderbilt University. Professor, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
Now, first, your thoughts on this staggering number of displaced people, 1 million or even more.
It is saddening. It's very depressing to hear the figures. It's possible that the figures are actually being underestimated. And what is even more saddening is the fact that the ongoing election campaigns are overshadowing the plight of the refugees and the displaced people. The scale of the displacements have been massive. With refugees in Yola, Maiduguri, some have even made their way to the capital. And of course, some have made their way to Cameroon, Chad, and Niger. And yet, there doesn't seem to be any discussion of their plight and how to improve conditions in these camps.
Now, this is the most mind-boggling thing to most people. Why is it that the leadership in Nigeria can find it an opportune time to go around campaigning rather than talking about this issue? What are you getting out of that country?
Well, on the one hand, elections have been scheduled for next month. And so the candidates have to campaign and articulate their plans to solve the problem, to solve the insurgency and other problems plaguing Nigeria. So, Nigerians want to listen to well-crafted plans and strategies for dealing with the insurgency, for dealing with the displacements and the refugees. So the campaigns have to go on. So the challenge for the candidates is to campaign in a manner that doesn't portray them as being insensitive to the scale of suffering that is going on, the displacement, the refugees, and the ongoing, almost daily attacks. So it's a delicate balance that the candidates have to try to strike. Now, personally, I don't feel like they've been able to strike that balance quite yet.
And that those who feel like this is going to cut off, the insurgency is going to cut off like millions of people from the electoral process. Is it fair to conduct an election in such an environment?
Well, in the states most affected by the insurgency, Borno State, Yobe State, and part of other states in the Northeast, I think the elections cannot hold. As a practical matter, the elections cannot hold in certain areas of this state because these areas are controlled by Boko Haram, and the electoral officers would not just go there. The question is whether the elections can hold in the areas of this region that are not controlled by Boko Haram, and whether the results from those areas alone would be legitimate. Something that is representative of the electoral wish of the people in those areas. That's a question that is up in the air.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks a lot, Professor Ochunu, for your insights.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's Moses Ochunu is a professor at Vanderbilt University. Now, in a State of the Union address, U.S. President Barack Obama kept up the country's tough rhetoric on terrorism, promising to fight to eliminate any threat against the U.S. or its allies. Yet even as his administration claims it is making progress, there are serious concerns the terror threat is growing. VOA's Jeff Selden reports.
In the skies over the Middle East, U.S. and allied warplanes engage in a steady bombardment of the Islamic State. In his address to the nation, President Obama said the U.S. is stopping the group's advance, and he took aim at a problem that has gone global.
We will continue to hunt down terrorists and dismantle their networks, and we reserve the right to act unilaterally, as we have done relentlessly since I took office, to take out terrorists who pose a direct threat to us and our allies.
Analysts agree the U.S. has shown it can find and hit terrorists where they hide. Yet even in the face of U.S. airstrikes, the Islamic State has refused to back down and continues to parade hostages it threatens to kill. David Gardenstein-Ross at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies isn't surprised by the group's resilience.
Overall, the threat of violent non-state actors committed to a jihadist ideology has massively increased over the course of the past 4 years. We're not moving in the right direction.
Part of that, he says, stems from a consistent choice by the Obama administration.
A lot of the mistakes that have been made have been when they have preferred democratic revolution over stability. In particular, the decision to go into Libya has been a very costly decision from the perspective of jihadist groups.
During the Arab Spring revolts, President Obama said the U.S. welcomed change that advanced self-determination and opportunity in the face of what he called the raw power of the dictator. Yet U.S. military officials now believe there are a couple of hundred Islamic State fighters training at camps in eastern Libya. Other groups are also using Libya to rest their fighters, make connections, and acquire weapons. Even in places where the U.S. saw progress, like Yemen, the situation can change quickly. The latest instability there raising concerns about al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, linked now to the terror attacks in Paris and the threats of foreign fighters. Terror analyst Max Abrams via Skype.
We have an unknown number of people with loose connections to al-Qaeda and to Islamic State. And I think that these kinds of attacks that we saw in France are going to be on the rise.
U.S. intelligence officials say of the estimated 19,000 foreign fighters that have flown into Syria and Iraq, at least 1/3 are from the Middle East and North Africa. But they also worry about a growing number, at least 3,400, that in some cases have been coming and going from Western countries, in a global battle some analysts say is headed in the wrong direction. Jeff Zeldin, VOA News, Washington.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. Check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, Sierra Leone opens its first care center for pregnant women infected with Ebola. Stay with us.
I'm Milar Sega. I'm the host of VOA's The Correspondents, a roundup of the world's top stories with analysis from our dedicated reporters. It's really a conversation the same way that you would bring a friend to your home and ask them what's going on. And our correspondents will do that and answer those questions through their own eyes.
That appears a false choice in more ways than one.
We can't actually put you there, but we can come pretty close. In 30 minutes, we'll show you the world.
Well, joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu. Welcome back, Lino.
Thank you, Vincent. Well, the World Health Organization just certified Ghana as Guinea worm-free. Guinea worm disease afflicts the world's poorest and most isolated communities and is contracted when people consume Guinea worm-contaminated water. As a result, a meter-long worm slowly emerges from the body through a painful blister in the skin. The neglected tropical disease is being wiped out through health education and behavior change, such as teaching people to filter all drinking water. Today, Guinea worm disease remains endemic in pockets of South Sudan, Mali, Chad, and Ethiopia. There are no vaccines or medicines to prevent or treat the disease. Observers say Ghana's eradication of Guinea worm is a result of hard work, political commitment, and the support of the international community. The World Health Organization says the final stage of experimental Ebola vaccines will start at the end of this month and February in the 3 worst affected West African countries. Phase 3 trials, also known as efficacy or final stage trials, will be conducted in Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. 2 vaccines, the Chad 3 developed by GlaxoSmithKline and the VS-Visibov from a collaboration between Neuralink Genetics and Merck, started initial clinical testing on safety and immunogenicity in the autumn. A 3rd one, developed by Johnson & Johnson, has also started first phase trials and should soon be ready to undergo larger tests on efficacy. Dr. Marie-Paule Kearney is Assistant Director General of the World Health Organization.
We know now that the two vaccines that have already undergone the first phase of testing, which looks at safety and immunogenicity, so does it induce an immune response, have an acceptable safety profile. So that's really a good news. So it means that these two vaccines, which are the most advanced, are continuing their journey towards evaluation. These trials are about to begin for the two lead vaccines against the chimp adenovirus developed by GSK and the VSV developed by Merck. And we have already been informed of plans of a third manufacturer, Johnson & Johnson, to also engage into efficacy testing.
And WHO says mass production and mass vaccination could start within the next 6 months if the drugs clear the final stage. A much-needed health facility has just opened in West Africa. The first care center for pregnant women in Ebola-stricken Sierra Leone is now accepting patients. As efforts to fight the deadly Ebola virus continue in Sierra Leone, the country just opened its first care center for pregnant women infected with the disease. The center is run by the medical charity Médecins Sans Frontières. Observers say women are particularly vulnerable to the disease, which is spread through direct contact with infected people and with the corpses of victims.
Pregnant women, we know that they are in higher risk of mortality than the rest of the Ebola patients. So we would like to focus and to try to reach these women as soon as possible to start treatment and to give them a chance of survival.
Medical authorities say it is unclear why the survival rate for pregnant women is lower than that of other patients. They say early testing and rapid treatment will help lower mortality rates, and the center aims to address that issue. Sierra Leone's first confirmed Ebola case was last May, when a pregnant woman was brought to the public hospital in the eastern town of Kenema from the border district of Kelahon. She died, infecting her nurses.
MSF has been working in this outbreak since the beginning in the different hotspots. Now it's real that it's already 3 months, more or less, and that the outbreak in Freetown is getting stronger. And we consider that the outbreak is still out of control. The cases are still very high. We are in more than 300 cases per week. And all the strategy is still not coping with this outbreak.
The World Health Organization says nearly 21,000 people have been infected with Ebola in Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia since it began in December of 2013. At least 8,000 people have died. Although there are some signs that the transmission is slowing down in the region, health officials caution there is still a long way to go to eradicate the disease. And that's our Africa Health Report for today. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, thanks a lot, Lenore. And be sure to watch out for Lenore Mudu every Tuesday and Thursday for the latest health news in Africa, right here on Africa 54. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, behind the scenes on David Beckham's latest fashion campaign shoot. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines.
In Mali, hundreds of people protest against airstrikes on Tuareg rebels by UN peacekeepers. An Egyptian court orders the release of ousted President Hosni Mubarak's sons pending a retrial for corruption. In the DRC, at least 42 people are dead in violent protests against a possible delay of the 2016 parliamentary elections.
That's the possibility.
In Nigeria, the government plans to delay February elections to give organizers sufficient time to distribute millions of biometric ID cards to voters.
That's it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. It's Oscar season and celebrities are brawling on social media again. Oscar-nominated film American Sniper was the most popular movie at the box office in its wide release opening weekend, earning more than $100 million in ticket sales. But don't count Michael Moore and Seth Rogen among its fans. Over the weekend, the Oscar-winning documentary filmmaker and the comedic actor and star of The Interview took to their Twitter feeds to criticize the movie and what they consider its glorification of violence. And then former Republican vice presidential candidate and conservative firebrand Sarah Palin entered the fray. She took to Facebook to post a long message including "God bless our troops, especially our snipers." Well, next up, soccer star turned style icon David Beckham has teamed up with fashion brand H&M once again. The new ad for the campaign is directed by Mark Forster, the man behind movies including Quantum of Solace and World War Z. For spring 2015, Bex will pick his favorite items from the brand's Modern Essentials collection to create the Modern Essentials selected by David Beckham line. He has also created a new bodywear collection for the retailer. Both collections will be launched globally on March the 5th. And finally, after 35 years, it's time to say goodbye. Iconic heavy metal band Motley Crue will end of their touring career and will conclude their 2-year final tour cycle on New Year's Eve in their hometown of Los Angeles. After that, the legendary head-banging quartet will hang up the hairspray for good. The tour will kick off the second phase of shows in Japan next month, featuring the return of Tommy Lee's flying drum set. The 2014 leg of the final tour was one of last year's top-grossing tours, selling close to 1 million tickets and grossing more than $45 million. And that is what is trending today. And that is our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords. Listen to this report about the Ebola virus in Africa.
The speaker is American Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield. She is talking about 2 African leaders who could not come to Washington for talks.
We understand what they're doing and why they had to make the tough decision not to come to Washington, but to stay at home and address this critical problem.
The word critical has several different meanings.
In our story, critical means very serious or important. Critical can also mean a turning point for something. For example, a battle could be a critical point in a war when one side takes the lead.
Now, when you hear the word critical, you will know what this newsword means.